Good evening. We're good? Good. All right. Good evening, everyone. We have so many persons who join us on Wednesday evenings, especially online. We were trying to get them plugged in. So if you are joining us, sorry it was blank for a few minutes there, but we recognize that we're back on now. Tonight we are continuing our This Is My Story series. Last week we kicked it off with our youth director Brian Johnson and his wife Jackie, and it was an incredible evening of faith sharing. If you weren't with us last Wednesday night to hear their story, I truly encourage you to go online and pull up an archive, listen to it from our podcast or our app, go watch it on YouTube, Facebook. It's definitely worth it. They really shared in a very meaningful way a very powerful story. Tonight we have Debi Horimoto, who is our children's director. She's going to be sharing her faith story, and we're excited to hear from her. We've been doing this series, I think this is the fourth time we've done this over the last 6 years. We don't do it exactly every year, every 12 months. And we've often included staff. I've done one, Levi's done one. We try to encourage new program staff who speak regularly to our church to have the opportunity. We just have several new staff this year to include, and so we are thankful that 2 weeks in a row you'll get to be hearing not only faith stories that are inspiring on their own right, but also the faith stories of the people who are leading the next generation here at our church. We're very thankful for all that Debi and her family does to nourish the discipleship within our youngest people. Well, actually not our youngest people. You don't go into the nursery, do you? The one step up from the nursery, and we're thankful for the grace and the skills that you bring to our kindergarteners through our fifth graders. They're getting ready to go to their winter camp, the third, fourth, and fifth graders. We just found out we outgrew one of our rooms, so that's always a good problem to have, and trying to make enough room for winter camp in 2 weeks. And so we're prayerfully excited about that. In 1 week. Something like that. It's coming up soon. If you know, you know. And if you don't, it's too late to sign up. We've already got too many. We also are pleased to announce that next Wednesday evening is going to be retired U.S. Navy Captain Timothy Kinsella. I know him as Lucky in the community, so it's hard for me to remember all of his other signs. His last deployment was to be the commander, the CO of Naval Air Station Pensacola. So for a little over 3 years, he has been the chief flag officer at NASP, and because of that, been very involved in our community, influential within our community, and recently retired as of a week and a half ago, and chose to retire here in Pensacola, in this area. He's Presbyterian, but we're not going to hold that against him, and we are delighted that he will be with us next Wednesday. He is a guest outside of our church, but very much a part of this community, and has partnered with our church for ministry efforts in the past, especially he and I have partnered together for some times of trauma on the base. And so I do hope that you'll be here next Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. Invite your friends, your Bible study groups, your Sunday school classes, because it's really always a nice thing when a guest is willing to come and give their time to our church. And so we want to make sure he has a good experience with us as well. So we're thankful for that. That's next Wednesday, February 2nd. Tonight, as Debi comes forward, we'll open us with a word of prayer. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for all the ministers who are with us in this room tonight, each and every one of us called into ministry in our own ways, and especially we thank you for Debi Horimoto, for all of the many ways that you have blessed her and gifted her, the graces you have poured into her life, and the willingness she has to share those with us. Thank you for the ministry she does with our young people and their families, and thank you for the opportunity to hear her story of faith tonight. In your Son's name we pray, amen. Do I give her this? She knows. I just work here, Debbie.
I was taught when I was a child that you got what you asked for, and I heard the story of Solomon, so I prayed for wisdom every day for years, so I was able to figure this out. I really did. I did. My father used to come in every night and lay hands on my head, even if I was asleep, because he worked retail and he'd get in late sometimes, and he'd pray for me every evening. I can remember it when I was a little bit older, but he would do it from the time I was in the crib. I don't remember that, but my mom told me. But I grew up with Christ, not only the center of our home, but the center of our life. Everything about our lives, Christ was at the center of everything I knew. We went to church every Sunday night, every Wednesday, choir practice on Thursday, and if a revival was in town, we were there at our church. We went every night. And so we were always, always in church. And my dad went to Bible school. Before he married my mom, he went to Lakeland. We were from Panama City. I should have started with that. But he went to Bible school, ran out of money, came back to Panama City, married my mom, and then when he got enough money back put together, he went back to Lakeland to finish college. And by that time, I was with them. And so I got to go to Bible college with Dad. And I really did. The experience of Bible college was wonderful. Some of my favorite memories. If you've ever been to Lakeland, Florida, it's called that because of all the lakes. Some of them we would call ponds. They're so small, but they call them lakes. And they're everywhere. And there's alligators in all of them and alligators in the puddles. And so he would go fishing in the evenings. And I remember being there with my dad fishing, and he would wade out into the water this deep. And the alligators, as the sun went down, would come and they would circle him. My father was fearless, and he would cast, and they would get his bait, and he would just keep casting and cutting the hooks and casting. And I was so afraid for my father and so afraid of the alligators that in my imagination, I could see these alligators coming out of the water and getting both of us. So I would run, and he would fish in the lakes on the college campus, but we would drive across campus to these lakes. And I would run, get in the car when there were just too many alligators and they were too close and I would try to stay there and protect my dad, but it would be too much. And I'd run, get in the car, and then I would struggle with this decision. I can remember this as a 4-year-old because it was so traumatic. I would struggle with the decision. Should I lock the doors to keep the alligators out? But then my dad won't be able to get in if they're chasing him. It never occurred to me at 4 years old that the alligators couldn't get in the door either way, but I would struggle with that decision. So, hi, Mom and Dad, I know you're watching on the live stream. Thank you for those memories. But my parents, they brought us up with Christ at the center of everything. My grandmothers and my grandfathers, they worked in church, and they served in their churches. And I will quietly tell you that we attended First Assembly of God, Panama City, Florida. But my mother was raised Methodist, and my grandmother attended the Methodist church a half mile down the street. So I'm kind of half Methodist. But growing up, Assembly of God was a little different. If you don't know, you don't know. But if you know, you know. The hair, you know. I see a hand. The generation before me, my dad didn't enforce this on us, but my grandmother's generation, those ladies, they didn't cut their hair, and they wore it very high, and they didn't wear pants, and they didn't wear jewelry, and they worshiped very loudly. And we were the church with drums. Nobody else had drums, and that made us weird. I felt sorry for my Methodist grandmother's church because when we would visit there, I thought they couldn't afford drums. We were called, it was really kind of embarrassing to tell people that you went to the Assembly of God church. Because if you went to the Methodist church, everybody went, oh, that's nice. And if you went to the Presbyterian church, they went, oh, that's nice. And if you went to the Catholic church, they went, we have Catholics down here? And so if you went to the Assembly of God church, they went, she's a holy roller. We had those nicknames. But I am really, really, really glad to see that the Methodist Church can now afford drums. So thank you for joining us. Who's the holy roller now? And so we had all of this influence in our lives. And my sister and I have one sister, just the two of us, and we had all of this influence. So Christ was always a presence in my life. And we had wonderful altar services. That's what we called them. And we had an altar across the front where you would kneel. And every week, the pastor, we moved a lot, so whatever pastor I had, because my dad's job, they would always offer an invitation for you to come, and they would pray with you to ask Jesus to come into your heart. And I grew up hearing that, and I grew up praying that prayer every week. As soon as I was old enough to understand anything about what was going on, I would pray. And I would go down to that altar so many times. I mean, every week, I'd march my little legs down there, and I would go, and I would kneel, and I would pray. But I remember, we lived in South Carolina for a while. We usually lived sort of all around Florida, but we were in South Carolina, and Reverend Sanford Jones, that night, I remembered I was 6, and we were sitting probably 2/3 of the way back this long church, and he made the altar call. And that night, for some reason, I really understood. I understood this was it. And I remember my heart thumping nearly out of my chest. As I marched that night, the aisle seemed so long, and I marched down that center aisle, and I went to that altar, and he was very tall. And he kneeled down on the other side of the altar and looked across at me and spoke with me with a smile and then prayed that prayer with me. And that was the night that I began following Christ for myself. Not because it was our heritage, not because my parents did it, but for myself. And I remember that. It was a very special night. And those are the memories that have built my foundation and why I'm here, why I do what I do. And some of my favorite memories, some do involve gators. Others involve wonderful times, like in that church in South Carolina. My dad was the youth pastor for a time. And we moved, again with his job, across the state line over into a little town in Georgia. And so we would every weekend, because when I was a little girl, you had, I think they were called blue laws, but you weren't allowed to open on Sundays unless you were like a pharmacy. And so he would be closed on Sundays, so we would drive to Greenwood, South Carolina, for him to continue to work with the youth. And the church had an evangelist suite in the back, and they would let us sleep in that suite for the weekend. And I would run around the church and look and stare at all of the paintings. They had this painting that was about as big as one of these TVs or these screens that was of Jesus praying in Gethsemane. And all of these paintings and these memories and the artist renditions of what they think Christ looked like is in these important moments. And then you walk down this hall, and a side door opened into the front of the sanctuary right by that altar. And so my dad, when we would spend the night there, he would go down to that altar to pray. And he didn't turn on the lights. And I was a big fraidy cat. I really didn't like the dark. And, some children don't like the dark, but I really didn't like the dark. But I wanted to be at my dad's feet all the time. And I loved it when he would drive the church bus, and I'd ride with him and all of those things. And so when he would go to pray at the altar, I would go down with him. I'd run down the hall by him, and I had to keep up because I didn't want to get left in the dark. And we would go down, we'd go in that side door, and he would kneel at that altar. Now, because we were Assembly of God, we prayed for long periods of time, so our altars were actually padded, so, you could lean on them. And so he would lean on that padded altar, and he would pray. And he would pray way into the night. And I would kneel beside him, and I would pray until I just would get bored. And who knows what I did. I probably nagged at him or whatever, but he would be patient with me, and he would let me stay and, do my thing. And then eventually I would fall asleep. And I'd wake up the next morning in the bed in the missionaries or the evangelist suite, my mom waking me up to get ready for church. Some nights, I just pretended to be asleep, because my dad was really strong. He would lift refrigerators and stuff. He really did. He was really scared all my boyfriends, kept them straight. But he would lift me and take me to bed, and I would pretend to be asleep just so he could carry me to bed. And those are some of my memories. Riding the church bus, he would promise the kids, if you bring a friend and we all get a hamburger. So I would ride on those days because we'd go to McDonald's and we'd all get a hamburger. All of those things, just watching them, him and my mom, serve the Lord. Mom was a stay-at-home mom, so her role was really supporting him, I guess you'd say, as he would teach and do these things. And she would help him, but she mainly would take care of us. But I loved spending that time with him and watching him. And my grandmothers were always teaching Bible classes and all of those things. And that's a big part of the reason I'm here where I am. I started teaching my first children's Bible school class when I was 16 years old. They needed help. They needed an assistant for this lady that was teaching the 3-year-old class. So I signed up to help her. And so I went to start my big night. It was a Wednesday night class. And I went to start my night. And I was so excited. I was on the path. I was going to be serving the Lord also. And so I went to help her. And I got back there, and people started bringing their kids. And the lady wasn't there yet. And so people continued to bring their kids and continue. There were like 10 or 12 kids, and they were all like 3 years old. And they're running around. And the woman never showed up, and we never saw her again. Never. We don't know what happened to her. And she never called anybody. And so there I was, and I couldn't leave them. And the mothers must have been awfully trusting. You wouldn't do that today. You wouldn't just drop your kid and go, but they did. And there I was. And so I just started doing what my children's pastors had done through all my life. I just started telling Bible stories and acting out Bible stories. And the next week, we all thought she would be back. And again, I couldn't leave and go tell anybody. So after a few weeks of this, they said, we got to get a teacher back there. And the story as it was told to me was the mothers went to the pastor and said, you better not. She's doing a good job. Leave her alone. And so that's when I discovered my passion and my call to children's ministry when I was 16, just because I wanted to be an assistant. But I've been serving as a layperson since then. But the rest of my history, I didn't go straight into the ministry full time. I enjoyed serving as a layperson anywhere I lived and throughout my life. But I was still in high school, and so I continued on at high school. And at that time, we were living in Montgomery, Alabama. And so I did not. If any of you live across in Lillian, I'm sorry, and I don't mean to offend, but I am a Florida girl at heart. I did not want to be an Alabama resident. Not at all. I cried the night we moved. My dad had started his job, and we stayed in Panama City to finish the school year. And the night we went up there with him, and our stuff had already been moved, I buried my head in the back seat, and I cried. And I cried, and I cried. I did not want to leave my friends. We had moved before, but this was the hardest move. And so off we went to Montgomery. And I graduated like a good Alabama girl from Robert E. Lee High School. You cannot get more Southern than that. Robert E. Lee High School. But I enjoyed my high school years. And I did several jobs in the church during that time. I played saxophone in the marching band and oboe and bassoon in the concert band. So I played. The Pentecostal church did not have room for an oboe or a bassoon. That's too formal. But I did play saxophone. I rocked that saxophone during worship. And I transposed music for the choir director. And I was secretary for the visitation team. I was enjoying life. I was having fun. But I knew since I was in 5th grade what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I had a plan. This is how it came about. Anybody remember Angie Dickinson and Policewoman? I do. I decided I was going to be a policewoman, and I meant it. For 2 years, I ran around begging my friends to play cops and robbers, and I was always Angie Dickinson. And I told my parents I was going to be a police officer. I read everything I could find to read about police officers. And so one day, my dad figured out this is pretty serious. And she's built like her grandmother, so she's not going to be very tall. Probably won't make the cut. Really don't know how I got in the Navy. I think they mismeasured. But anyway, he said, Debbie, God gave you a lot of smarts, but you're not going to be real tall. He didn't give you that. And police officers get shot at a lot. Now, you also have to think about, this is in the late 60s, early 70s. There weren't a lot of female police officers. So he was also afraid, his girl's going to be out there. And he said, he gets shot at a lot on the street. Why don't you do something that's a little more academic? Why don't you maybe become a detective or an FBI agent? Okay. So I read everything I could about FBI agents, and I began to read all the Al Capone stories, and it was so exciting. And then I did that for a year. By the time I got to the end of 5th grade, my dad sat me down. He said, your real talent is book smarts. And it is. God gave me that. It's a talent. And he said, you make good grades, you're smart. Maybe you should think about being a lawyer. You'll still be seeking justice, but you won't be getting shot at. He never would have said shot at. If he knew I said at the end of a sentence, he would get me even today. I would never at which be shot. So I said, what's a lawyer? And so I began to read all the books I could about lawyers, and I began to study, and I began to read. And that was it. That was what I was going to do. So I already made good grades. It came naturally to me, but I began to really focus on my grades, and I stressed all through junior high school to make good grades because I wanted to get into all the good classes in high school. I went to high school, and I stressed about my grades and my classes, except for this will sound so foreign to the younger people, but we used to have a track in school, and most of the girls went through the secretarial track in high school. And they took typing and business accounting and that kind of thing. And then there was the academic track. And there were a lot of girls in that too, but it was, if you were headed to college, trigonometry and calculus, all that stuff. So I up and took a typing class, and my parents, what's that about? Or have you changed your mind? I said, no, when I get to law school, I want to be able to type my own papers. Oh, okay. I mean, I was adamant. That's what I was going to do. So I went through high school, got out of high school, and went to AUM. If you're not familiar with AUM, it's Auburn University Montgomery. Now, I had moved to Alabama in junior high school. I did not know that in Alabama, you are either an Alabama fan or an Auburn fan. They should educate you on that before you ever cross the state line because it can get you in big trouble if you give the wrong answer in the wrong group of people. But God protected me because I was a Florida State fan. So when they would say, you're new at our school, who you for? What do you mean? Who you for? Well, I'm for Jesus. I don't know. I mean, football. I like Florida State. Well, they didn't know how to answer that. They were ready to fight if you said the wrong Alabama team, but they didn't know what to do if you said some other state. They would look at me like I was an alien. They go, where'd she come from? And I actually had them ask me that. I grew up in Panama City mostly, in South Florida some. You know what they would ask me in Montgomery? Where are you from? I'm from Panama City. Well, they knew Panama City because it used to be called AEA instead of Spring Break Week. It used to be called Alabama Education Association Week, AEA, and they'd all flock to Panama City. Good girls were not allowed to go to the beach during that week because there was lots of trouble out there, so we had to stay home. And so all the Alabama folks would take it over. And so they knew Panama City. And I'd say, I'm from Panama City. No, where are you from? I'm from Panama City. No, you don't talk like you're from the South. Where are you really from? And so I went through that, all of that stuff in Montgomery. And so here I was, and I had moved in, and I not only did I not understand the football situation, I was so proud. The 70s were hard. We went through a recession, and it was really hard, and my dad's job had taken a real hit. And so we didn't have the trendiest clothes when I was in 7th grade in Panama City. I mean, my parents provided, and I did okay, but I didn't have the most hip clothes in the school. I didn't look like a total nerd. But for starting school in Montgomery, they got me some really cool clothes. And I had the new straight leg Levi's, complete with the red tag on the pocket, which you had to have, or it was not cool. I had the red tag. I had my roller coaster shoes. That was a thing in the 70s. I had my roller coaster shoes, and I had my Just So t-shirt. And I hopped out of that car at Capitol Heights Junior High School, and my parents pulled away, and everybody there was still in bell bottoms and long hair. And I was on the outside again. Like, I cannot win. And so I was the weirdo in school. So Anyway, that was just part of, growing up. But here I was trying to navigate junior high school in Montgomery, Alabama, and I eventually won people over, and I eventually fit in. And they actually liked me so much, they elected me captain of the basketball team at my height. I couldn't hardly hit a basket, but they did because they liked me, and that was real nice of them. But I went on. I didn't play basketball past junior high because I was just way too short. But I went on, and we continued in Montgomery. And because I was in Montgomery and I was now an Alabama girl, I ended up at AUM because, of course, in-state tuition. So I did eventually get my dream of going to Florida State for a semester. Hated it. Went back to AUM, so learned my lesson there. But I went to AUM. It was a great school. If you know anything about Auburn in Alabama, Auburn University Montgomery is a branch of Auburn. It is not Auburn. And the people at Auburn will very quickly and arrogantly remind you of that. You are not allowed football tickets. You are not allowed to say you go to Auburn. If you have a little fun, play a little joke, and join the beauty pageant for Miss AUM like I did one year just to see what it was like. They won't let you sell to the people that advertise in the Auburn beauty pageant brochure. So we really were not Auburn students. And when I graduated with my degree in business management, they had the audacity to give me a degree that said Auburn University. No, it's supposed to say AUM, but it didn't. It said Auburn University. So then I was off. I told you I wanted to go to law school. Well, I took a year off. Only one thing can get a girl off her goal: love. I took a year off to get married, and I married a nice fella, good fella, and we're still friends. I did go through a divorce, and never thought I'd have to go through that, but I did. So you don't have any ugly stories. It's just we're still friends. But we did go through a divorce, but not before we had two beautiful children who work here at the church. And when Pastor David said our family serves, they do serve with me. They always help. Mom, can I help? Mom, what can I do? And they help teach Sunday school. One of them assists in Sunday school. One does a lot of administrative work. My husband runs the sign-in table because we all serve together. And so I have two beautiful children from that marriage. But I got married, and then off we went to Tuscaloosa, to the University of Alabama School of Law. And those were, remember I told you I really worried about my grades in high school. I stressed in college. I wanted to get into the University of Alabama, and that was anybody didn't get to go. You had to make the grades. That was the school in Alabama. I wanted to get in. I stressed over my grades. The day I got accepted, all of that weight came off. I was the most relaxed student in my class. And somebody looked at me during exams and said, one year, how is it that you don't have hives like everybody else, and your face isn't breaking out and all of that, and you're so relaxed? I said, what can they do to me? I worked too hard to get here. I'm not going to flunk out. So what can they do to me? I was the most relaxed law student you ever saw, and I enjoyed my law school years. I was there for 3 years, and while I was there, most of the students, especially the first year of law school, couldn't have any extracurricular activities because it was just too stressful and too hard. Hey, I was like, what can they do to me? So I continued to serve as a layperson. We found a good church, and I began to serve, and I said, oh, you don't have a children's choir? You want a children's choir? I'll put together a children's choir. Oh, you don't have a play? I'll write you a play. And we were off and running. And they said, will you just direct our program? I said, sure. And we were putting together, and we had this really great kids program going. And then we were sitting and planning VBS. And they had not had VBS in a few years. And we were planning VBS, and we were sitting around this table, and the volunteers that worked in the program were there. And we were putting together our, what would you call it, our flyer, and deciding what we would put on it. And they said, there's these new neighborhoods over here, and they were nice subdivisions. And they said, we're these neighborhoods, so we're going to walk around and give out the flyers. I said, that's a great idea. Yeah. We'll walk through that neighborhood and that neighborhood. I said, that's a great idea. And then one of the moms looks at the other mom and says, now they grew up in this church. I was an outsider. And she looked at the other one and said, well, some black people have moved into that neighborhood. I'm taking notes. She said, so what are we going to do if a black person opens the door? Wait, what? What did you just ask? Well, what are we going to do if a black person opens the door? I said, you hand them a flyer. Oh, no, we can't do that. Why can't you do that? You just hand them a flyer. They speak English, you know. Well, we don't allow black people at this church. What do you mean you don't allow? You mean they haven't come here? No, some have come. We asked them to leave. It broke my heart. You can't see past skin color? For children? How can you live with yourself? And I looked and I said, no, it makes no difference. And they said, oh, no. And then one of them, they just ignored my surprise and shock and act like I wasn't even in the room. And one of them says, oh, I know, we'll just get a gospel flyer that tells about the gospel, and we'll reach from the bottom of the pile and hand them that one. And it won't mention VBS. By the next week, I was out of there. I went to the leadership and said, is this the truth? Yeah. I was out. I didn't know. I had no idea. And so after I graduated from law school, I went in the Navy. But later, when I got out of the Navy, back to that sense of justice. And I mean, I really did have that. I used to be the kid that when somebody was getting bullied, I would get between the bully and the other kid. I might get hit, but it didn't matter because I didn't want to see that kid get bullied. So after I got out of the Navy, my main area of focus in the practice of law as a civilian practicing here in Pensacola was civil rights. Religious rights, disability discrimination rights, race and national origin rights. And I feel very strongly about those things. But especially in our Christian walk, how can you not see past skin color? I don't understand that. I don't understand that you can't know that soul is going to heaven or hell just like yours. I don't understand that. So as I went on, I graduated before I graduated from law school, my husband had heard me say, I thought about going in the military because I always wondered if I could do it. I wondered if I could pass the physical test. And so one day he came home from work. He was managing a shoe store at the mall. And I came home from school and he said, hey, guess what? What? This Navy recruiter had a table outside my store. So I went and talked to him because it was a slow day. Did you know they have lawyers in the Navy? No, I did not. How about that's a new concept? He said, yeah. He said, they really need them. You interested? He's interested in talking to you. Yeah, I'm interested in talking to him. So in another month, December of my second year of law school, I raised my hand and swore my oath to serve my country. And there's this little secret in the Navy. If you're in the Navy, you probably know it. But lawyers, doctors, nurses, dentists, medical service corps officers, we go to a little thing called officer indoctrination school, because we're already officers. We already swore. We already took our oath. Your combat officers, your pilots, they go to officer candidacy school, OCS. We go to OIS. The easiest way to describe the difference between OIS and OCS, we were on the third deck. And the OCS the students were on the first and second decks. And our building in Newport was a long hall, and then off of it were these hallways where the dorms were, and there was grass in between those. And in the mornings, when the drill instructors would gather the OCS students and start yelling at them, we would get up and close our windows so we could go back to sleep. That was the difference. So I was never a combat officer. So I went through OIS between my second and third years of law school. And so I was ready to serve when I got out of the Navy. And it was all fun. I mean, I know that serving, I took it seriously, and I knew you could go to war. I knew I wouldn't. First of all, I was a girl. We didn't send girls to war or anywhere near a war zone then, except for, in the various wars, we've had nurses, female nurses, that have served bravely. But like in my job, I would not end up anywhere near a battlefield. And we had been at peace for a long time. And so my last year of law school, things were heating up in the Gulf. And so all of this began to happen. And I went after law school. I graduated. I took the Florida bar exam. Only 50% passed that year. I was in the 50% that did. And then I was off to justice school back to Rhode Island. I had gone to OIS in the summer. Rhode Island in the winter is a place I never, ever want to be again. Back to that Florida girl thing, the snow was this deep. My husband had to go ahead and leave his job, and they had put me in a condo out in town because the officers' barracks were full, and the officers' the quarters. And so I had room for my husband to just come on and join me. And we were going home one night from a restaurant, and I thought, well, I've never had a snowball fight. So I picked up some snow, and it is so soft. Snow is so soft. It was fresh snow, and it was so soft. And I packed it all together. And it was so soft. And I took it, and he had no idea what was coming, and I flung it as hard as I could and hit him dead in the middle of the back. And he said, "Ow! Did you just throw a brick at me?" I said, "No, it was just snow." I did not know that when you pack the snow together, it's like throwing a rock. And I gave him this big bruise on his back. It was awful. But we were there in the winter, and we got out. While I was in justice school, well, let me back up a little bit. I came to Pensacola while I was waiting in between taking my bar exam. I got my license. I got sworn in to the Florida bar. And then I had to wait till the next justice school started. And I knew it was serious. But we were at peace. And then life hits you. I'm sitting at my desk here at Naval Air Station on the third deck, the old legal office, before I even took care of that. And I'm sitting there, and this kid comes in for me to write his will because he has to be on the tarmac to fly out the next morning. And he tells me his name. "Are you Karen Carpenter's little brother?" "Yeah." You grew up in First Assembly of God Church?" "Yeah." And I began to tell him who I was. But inside, the part I wasn't saying to him, "I am helping you fill out your will because you're going off to die. High probability you won't be coming back." Now, this is what we thought at the times. We didn't know how good or bad or easy it was going to be. And that really was a rude awakening to the seriousness of what I had undertaken when I raised my hand and swore my oath. And I did take it very seriously. I enjoyed my time in the Navy. But even in peacetime, well, we had pilots fall out of the sky when they're training, and they die. I had to help with those investigations. And even in peacetime, our preparedness takes the lives of our people. And so when we appreciate our active duty and our veterans, that appreciation should be true, even if they served in peacetime, because it's still a risk, and it's something we should take seriously and realize what they are giving for us. So I had joined the Navy, and I was off, and I was supposed to go, I forget where I was supposed to go. Maybe it was the Philippines. I think it was the Philippines. Anyway, I was supposed to go overseas. And my detailer calls me up, and he says, I really need somebody somewhere else. I've got some people that want to go there. Would you be willing to go to Guam? I actually looked, I was on the phone. I actually said to the man, "What's a Guam?" I had never heard of that in my geography classes. And he explained it to me that it's a sleepy little island. You won't have much trial work. They never, because quite frankly, most of our trial work are unauthorized absences, and it's a little island. There's nowhere to go, so nobody goes AWOL. And so it'll be sleepy, but it's a good billet because for promotion purposes, it's considered a hardship, even though it's really not. It's a good life. He said, "I was stationed there, it's a good life." I said, "Okay, I'm game, I'll take it." I got over there. On my way there, I had to stop in Hawaii to go on a ship. Because you see, JAG officers, lawyers, are kind of dumb. That's their opinion of us. It's like, I actually had people come in my office and say, "They told me to come see you. Lieutenant, but I want a real lawyer. I am a real lawyer. I passed the bar exam. But they get this idea that we're some kind of make-believe, lawyer. And so the fleet thinks that we're not real smart, probably because we were closing our windows when they were getting yelled at and we were going back to bed. But they thought that we needed help to understand what they did. And so we were required to go on a ship on our way to our duty station. So I went on a ship outside of Hawaii and went to sea for 10 days. Another thing, when I was going in the Navy, they were just starting to put women on ships. So this was kind of a big deal for us to go ride a ship, because normally we wouldn't get to go on a ship. And so off I went, and I rode the ship. I had several times got to do work on ships like this. I would just ride with them and then get sent back to Guam. One time, the captain gave me his captain's cabin right near the bridge. And that was such an honor that he did that for me. And there was this odd red light by my bunk. And I thought, well, that's pretty neat, because I'm still a little scared of the dark, and you cannot even see your hand in here. There are no portholes in this room. And so I wonder why, because this is the captain's cabin. He ought to have a porthole. And so I would turn that red light on to see at night. And then one day I had my regular light on because the red light wouldn't give me enough light. And I opened my hatch into the passageway. Well, if you know anything about the captain's cabin, it's his emergency cabin where he stays when he needs to be near the bridge, bad weather, war, whatever. And so all the people driving the ship are right outside that other door, right by my door. And I had my light on, and their door was open as they were coming in. I found out very quickly what that red light is for. You know what it's for? When you have a red light on, it doesn't blind you to darkness. My white light, on the other hand, blinded the whole bridge that was driving the ship. Yeah, I did that. So when I say they thought that the JAG officers were dumb, well, sometimes they weren't wrong. So we got lessoned in those things. But off I went to Guam. I got there for my CO for the first 18 months, and then he changed commands. He didn't want a girl there, and he had argued with the detailer he didn't want a girl. Now, I was not the first girl in the Navy, so I don't know what his hang-up was, but nobody told me that. And I could not understand why my life was so hard, but it was. And one day I'll tell you the story. They actually made a policy change because of what I went through in the Navy. The whole Navy JAG Corps changed its policy. But it was a very, very difficult time. And I continued to lean on my faith. I couldn't really serve. The situation I was in was awful. It was really a bad situation. And I was the only female officer he had. And so it was a very bad situation. I was working so many weekends, and so he just had me. He took all my secretarial staff away and put me in. I was the only defense lawyer on the island for the whole Navy, and I had no staff. And remember the sleepy little island? While I was there, they had more courts-martials than they'd ever had in a 2-year period in the island of Guam. So I was extremely busy. They had 3 prosecutors to prosecute the cases, but only me to defend all those people. And so it was sort of a setup for failure deal. Anyway, I didn't get to go to church very much. I rarely got to go. I didn't get to serve. I couldn't do any teaching or anything while I was there. But my faith in God got me through that. And I continued to stand, and I continued. One of the things that would have made it a little easier is if I would have gone partying with the guys. And I didn't. I would go to the officers' club for the required monthly, I forget what they call it. There was one night we had this special thing, but they would try to bribe me drinks, and I wouldn't. And they had all of these. I mean, I don't mind socializing, but they were really having drinking issues. And I just refused to do that. And then I was during that time, started training as a power lifter. And then I couldn't drink any alcohol because my coach would have really had my head. I was the Southwest Pacific heavyweight women's champion one year. So just so you know, all this little has a lot of power, all this short. But it was a really tough time, but I just kept standing on my faith. I had no pastor to lean on because I couldn't get involved in church. I just couldn't get the time. I was working all the time. I couldn't get any spiritual guidance or connection. And my husband and I were just sort of alone in this. And everybody in my command just after me. And I just kept standing. I'm going, why, God? Why did you bring me here? I know you opened this door. I know you called me into the Navy. You called me into the practice. Well, I've prayed about it all my life. I prayed about this Navy thing, and you opened doors that shouldn't have opened. And here I am, only to suffer greatly. I don't mind suffering, but this is bad. And there was a lot of unethical stuff starting to happen. They refused to give me a lock for my files, even after I caught the executive officer going through my confidential client files. Now, this was a lawyer, too. He knew the ethics behind that, and he broke them, actually. Broke those ethics rules. And there I was. I was going through things that didn't just hurt me. They hurt my clients. And they were getting hurt because of what was being done to me. And I said, God, this is just not just. It's not right. And I continue to stand. And then, later, God sometimes will let you see why you go through something. And one of the prosecutors came to me. And he said, my wife, I just caught her. I came home from work early and caught her with my best friend, who was a Marine officer. And I don't know what to do. And everybody's trying to take me out for a drink to get over it, to handle it. It had just happened. And he came to my house, knocking at my door, and with tears in my eyes said, you're the only person who can help me because you're the only one I know who's sober. And then I knew it's about more than me. It's about way more than me. And then eventually there was a policy change in the Navy which helped defendants. Even now, it's been a lasting effect that has helped them have fairer trials, which is important because the Navy has a lot of power over you, and if you don't get a fair trial, you can be set up even when you didn't do anything. So, and some people are guilty, but some people really can be set up when they didn't do anything. So, I give my ability to stand up in the face of whatever comes at me. I refuse to back down. And if I know the enemy's behind it, I am not going to let go. But I had these foundations built in me from a very young age. Not just my parents. My grandmother Ruby, my grandmother Hazel, they were stronger in their faith than my grandfathers, although my grandfathers were very supportive of them. I'm not saying they're not. But because of all of that heritage, I have this foundation and I've been able to stand. And so I practiced as a civilian, and then I felt the call, and I just felt this pull. I was serving at a church as a layperson, and I could not get past the call that God was calling me into full-time ministry. And I struggled because I said, God, are you calling me? But you called me to the practice of law. So is the enemy trying to run me out of that where you want me? Or are you calling me? Is it because, I had a successful practice, but it's hard. Is it hard and therefore I want to go do what's fun? Because it's fun to work with kids. And I struggled with it for a year, maybe a little more, but I really struggled, and I prayed, and it got to the point where I couldn't hear anything. It was like I was praying, and it was just going into a black hole. And I continued to pray. And then one day I came back, the hurricane had taken my home and had taken one of my offices. We had to move everything real quick so that we could save the files, and all of this stuff had happened, and everything was rebuilding, and I was rebuilding okay, it was fine. But I stood there, and I stood at my desk, and I had this nice desk, nice office, and I had a pile of files that had to have signatures and different things. And the higher the stack of files, the more the picture of success, if that makes sense. I had cases. The evidence was right there in front of me. I was going to make money. I'm okay. And I stood there, and one last time, I was tired. I was tired of trying to figure out this pull on my life. I was tired of trying to figure it out. I just was exasperated, and I just stood there, and I looked at these things, and I looked up at heaven. I said, God, What do you want me to do? And I'm telling you, it was not an audible voice, but I know in my spirit, I heard the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit answered after all of these months of nothing coming back, no answers. And I heard the Holy Spirit say, if you had your druthers, what would you do? If you're from the South, you know what druthers are. The I'd ruthers. I'd rather. If you had your druthers, what would you do? And in that moment of tiredness and exasperation, honesty came out. And I just said out loud, I would be in Mexico teaching kids about Jesus. Now, Mexico was a code word between God and me. He knew what I meant. I have worked with kids from the projects. I've worked with rich kids. I've worked with kids from all spectrums of financial being, all social circles. I don't care. It could be Mexico. It could be anywhere. He knew that's what I meant. I said, if I had my druthers, I would be in Mexico teaching kids about Jesus. And immediately in my spirit, I got an answer. Why aren't you? And that was the day I started closing my law practice. And that was the day that I knew that I was doing the right thing. Because it's a struggle. You know, you went to school for a long time and you spent a lot of money. You're wasting your life. You're wasting your education. I knew I would hear that. And I had to make sure I was doing the right thing. And I did hear that some. In fact, I love you, Dad. I'm not putting you down. It'll have a good ending. Dad said that to me one day, and he's always been proud of anything we've done. He's always encouraged us. And he didn't mean it bad. He meant it as a compliment. He said, I worry you're so smart that you're wasting. You're a good lawyer. You were a good lawyer. I'm still a lawyer. I'm just not practicing. He said, you were a good lawyer, and I worry that you're not using it. And after a couple of years, you know what he says? All the time. He'll see the play online, or he'll come and see something I'm doing. They come when they can, and he'll look at me, he'll say, that's the best thing I've ever seen. I'm so proud of you. And he says, you're not wasting a thing. And so he's been a huge supporter, and I promise you, he did not mean it bad when he said that. He just thought I was so smart. He's like, I just want you. When I joined the Navy and I went off to Guam, when I went to Guam, we stood in the airport in Birmingham, and my dad cried. And he didn't cry because he was sad I was going to Guam. He told me, he said, I'm just so proud of you. And so he was proud of me when he made that comment. But I thank them for the foundation. I thank them for what they did. And I thank God for the years that he called me to the practice of law. And I thank God for the years that he has me in ministry so that I can be one of the people helping build that foundation in our children.
Thank you, Debbie. That's so sweet of you to share from your heart. And I hope all of you got to hear a piece of her heart, and especially those who are not in her program. The parents who entrust their kids with Debi have such confidence in her ministry with them, and I'm grateful for the ones who are filling in for you tonight. There's quite a thing that happens across the street there, just down the path, on Wednesday evenings and on Sunday mornings, and we're grateful for the way that you shape our own child's life who's in your program and the rest of the children in this church. And we're thankful for your sharing this evening, and we're thankful to the parents who keep getting referred to tonight. When Hurricane Michael hit Panama City, is that when they came to live over here? Yes, when Hurricane Michael came to Panama City, they worshiped here as they lived in this area while their home was being rebuilt. So a good evening to you. We hope to see y'all next Wednesday night for another amazing This Is My Story. This Sunday we continue our sermon series, Broken Beloved. Katie Berry asked me to share with you, our Director of Worship Arts, if you're interested in singing in the cantata for Good Friday. A lot of our choir members who aren't at the 11 o'clock traditional worship service regularly or regularly in the choir want to sing in special services, please see her, and she would love to have you included in that performance. She's looking for extra singers for the cantata, and I'm excited that she and Debi are already working on a spring musical, which they will present to us on April 27th. And if you were here for our packed house to watch December's Christmas musical that the kids put on, it really is quite a thing. They do it all in-house and teach the children well, not only the stories of the faith, but how to express them in worshipful arts. And so thank you for your diligence in that ministry as well. Go in peace, and may the peace of Christ go with you.